Welcome to the esynergy podcast, conversations to cut through the hype and get to what works. I'm Grant Ongers, a security practice lead at esynergy, and in each episode we sit down with a business or technology leader to hear their unfiltered story, the lessons hidden in both success and failure, and the practical steps that turn big ideas into real impact. Today I'm joined by Dan Kellett, who's now the Director of Lending and Data Analytics at Carmoola, and who was formerly the CDO at Capital One. We'll explore all things data and likely get into the question of AI. This isn't just about technology or trends, it's about the people behind them, the choices that they make, and the insights that you can take into your own work. So let's dive in. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Grant. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you on the show. So during your intro, I mentioned Capital One, and there's a couple of reasons for that. To start with, you spent 24 years there. Hardly anyone in our industry has that kind of tenure anywhere anymore. So tell me, what was the conversation that happened in 2024, late 2024, that kind of ended with you going to a 10,000 customer business? It's a very big jump.
Yes, yeah, and I think it was, as with all these things, it's never one thing, but probably a bit of a reflection of the career I'd had to date. So whilst I was at Capital One for 24 years, it was a range of different roles, always in data and analytics. But I started as a graduate there, worked on the effective shop floor in terms of building models and so on, built a team, led a transition into data science and using different techniques. And then for the last 4 years, was acting as the UK's chief data officer. And had a great time, really enjoyed my time there, learned a lot, worked with a lot of great people. But I think I'd reached a point where I decided I want to try something different. Not completely different, because I love data and I love the application of data to solve real problems. But there were a few things I was keen to try. Firstly, I was keen to try my hand in a much more fast-moving organisation. So somewhere way earlier in its maturation, where you can have more of an impact on the strategy, you can move quickly, change things, and so that was one thing I was interested in. Secondly, I was really keen to get my hands dirty again and see if I can actually still do it. So early in my career, I loved writing code, pulling data, doing analysis, and I think it's fair to say as you progress in a large corporate structure, that takes you away.
You get further and further away from it, yeah.
And so I was spending more of my time in meetings and less of my time actually doing. And so this opportunity looked like a great chance to throw myself back in and get closer to the data. And about 15 months in now, and absolutely living up to both those two aspects. I think Carmoola is an incredibly fast-moving organisation. We make decisions, we use data to embed those decisions, but it's just been really kind of enjoyable to actually kind of throw myself back in.
Well, talking about Carmoola, your first concrete win, on your own CV, your own words, 10%, adding 10% approvals at stable risk from real-time decision and fraud controls. Walk me through that. So where does the lift come from?
Yeah, so I think kind of taking a bit of a step back, one of the biggest applications of data science or kind of data more broadly in financial services sits around that credit risk decision. So a customer comes to us, makes an application for a loan, and we've got a big decision to make. We have to decide whether we say yes or no to that customer. Now, we need to make sure that that's the right decision for us, but also for the customer. And we're trying to balance the affordability side. So can a customer afford to pay us back, with a credit risk angle, which is, will the customer actually pay us back or not? And so underpinning that decision typically is a reasonably complex model. And where we were from a Carmoola perspective is we had a very solid model. It did a good job of splitting customers who were likely to pay us back versus those who weren't. But actually, there were opportunities to make that model better. Now, when I think about kind of how do you improve those models, typically there's three different ways. One is you can use more recent data. So more recent data will give you a more up-to-date view of the world and how those different things interact. Secondly, you could use more data. So more predictive pieces of information that maybe you didn't have access to the last time you built that model. And then finally, you could use a more complex algorithm. You could use something that's better at making those splits between customers who pay you back versus those who don't. And so the model that we've deployed in the last quarter or so ticks all three of those boxes. More recent data, more data in terms of more predictive sources, and step change in terms of our algorithmic complexity. And so that's kind of underpinned a big shift for us in terms of the credit risk and who we can say yes to.
So I understand more recent data. You're either asking the customer for more recent data, or you're plugging into potentially the open banking system. More sources of data? Is it something similar? What are you doing there? What other sources are you investigating?
Yeah, so typically from a consumer finance perspective, a lot of your information and data will come from the credit reference agencies. So they hold a whole host of information about everybody's other credit agreements and how they're progressing.
Yeah.
And that tends to be one of the key sources of data when it comes to our decision. So with this new model, what we were able to do is bring in enhancements to the existing data sources. So different ways to think about that data, different ways of structuring it. You mentioned open banking. Open banking is definitely an alternative source of information and one that we use as part of our decision process as well. And so I think as a data leader, as a data scientist in financial services, one of the things you're always looking for is what are those other sources of data that might tell me something ideally orthogonally to what I currently have. Now, there's not lots of those data sources, and I think a lot of the time there's a risk that if you're looking for a needle in a haystack, you're just adding more hay. But I think those data sources are out there, and a key part of mine and my team's job is to test those new data sources.
I'm quite curious about the credit reference agencies, the CRA side of things, for a number of different reasons. But surely their goal would also be to gather those other data sources and integrate them to provide a better overall picture. Is Carmoola just trying to get slightly ahead of that so that you've got a slight edge? Is that kind of the approach that you're taking now?
Yeah, you're right, and I think it is a big responsibility on those CRAs to continue to increase the amount of data that's available for lenders. I think it's one of those things that the more of this data that's available will raise all boats and hopefully mean that more lenders are making the right decision and giving access to more people to credit. I think at the same time, as a lender, we're trying to find an edge upon our competition as well. And so if we're able to find that extra 1% on top of what we might be getting from elsewhere, then actually that's really valuable. The other aspect is if we build our own models and we use our own data sources, we're able to tailor that even more specifically to the customers who come to Carmoola. And so the models we build hopefully have that extra predictive power, but are also more tailored to our demographics of customers.
I have taken a little bit of a look at some of the I guess the way in which you're splitting up the data sets to uncover groups of customers that share similar profiles. I think Leading Ladies is one of the groups that you're looking at, and you're doing quite well in that sector. I do find it fascinating that there are characteristics that borrowers have in common that actually they seem unrelated to their financial status, but they are directly related to whether they're able to afford the loan that they're asking for, whether the thing they're going to do with the money, because they're buying cars, is going to potentially make them better borrowers in future. It's quite an interesting. There's a bit of a play on both sides, right? As a lender, you're helping yourself grow as an organization, but you're also helping the borrowers in many ways because what they're doing with that money they're borrowing.
Yes, yeah, and I think having a really good segmentation has lots of benefits. One is it helps you tailor your lending strategy, but actually I think perhaps even more so it helps you tailor your messaging, your communication, the way that you interact with your customer base, and we've spent a lot of time to make sure that we really understand what makes our customers tick, Because the more we understand that, the better we can design our processes, the better we can design our communications.
Yeah, I like the fact that it works for both parties. It isn't just a targeted marketing. It does actually result in better choices being made on both sides. That's great.
Yes, and I think I'm no doubt we'll get into AI to some extent, but I think like the use cases for AI that are most likely to be successful are the ones where you've got that alignment in outcomes. It's great for customers, but it's also great for the organisation as well.
So talking about AI, let's jump into one of the things that I think is quite an interesting aspect of something you've done. You sat on the FCA, Bank of England AI Public-Private Forum. Most of our listeners have never been in a room like that. So I'm curious, obviously you hear from the regulator, you're part of the conversations the regulator is having about decisions they haven't yet made. It's the regulator in financial services talking about AI. What are some of the things that the regulator was concerned with that you as a regulated industry didn't realize that was a big deal to them? And the other way around, like what are the things that you were concerned about the regulator was like, no, not worried about that at all? I'm sure that there's those kinds of conversations that happen there as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it was a really great initiative to be part of over the kind of 18 months that it ran for. And I think it was for multiple reasons. I think firstly, fair play to the FCA and the Bank of England. I think they recognised that there was an opportunity for them to listen and learn. Mm-hmm. And by creating this public-private forum, they were able to bring together a real mix of different organisations and backgrounds to start off initially as a conversation, but as the process went on, started to turn more and more into how do we think about regulation? How do we think about governance? What are some of the things that matter and some of the things that don't? So in terms of kind of your question, so some of the things that was perhaps a surprise, I think maybe in hindsight this wasn't a surprise, but I think it really highlighted the looseness around how AI is defined.
Yeah.
So I think if you had, a dozen people in the room, you probably had 25 different definitions of what AI was. And there's a real spectrum in terms of complexity, in terms of automated learning, and that really popped out when we started to talk about use cases, all the way to, is a logistic regression AI, through to much more complex kind of applications in neural networks. And I think you found that people sat all across that spectrum. So that was interesting. That was kind of a really nice way to start to explore the topic and to find out a bit more. I think I was a little surprised and pleased as to how open the FCA were to hear from industry in terms of best practices when it came to governance and regulation. Mm-hmm. I think quite quickly through the process we started to talk more and more about that, and that led to some really sensible, in my mind, decisions and perspectives from the FCA and the Bank of England on the outcome of that study. So yeah, it was a really kind of enjoyable process to be part of, really.
I was in a room recently with the FCA's CISO talking about how the FCA are actually using AI to help with some of the regulatory work. They still very strongly have human in the loop. They have AI do a bunch of pre-work and present that as homework to an analyst that actually does something with the data or the results, with very clear, I assume this because I read this in this particular document. And when I had Mike Jones here from Love Holidays, his line was, don't build AI in a lab, right? It was all about embedding it in the operating model. And for them, that is absolutely the way that the business has to operate and does operate. Their chatbot, Sandy, is now dealing with 60% of their chat and a quarter of their voice calls, like doing it all. At a smaller, more regulated business than Love Holidays, what's the philosophy? Is embedded everywhere Carmoola's approach, or does the risk surface mean that you have to be more judicious about where you do it and what you do with it?
Yeah, so our perspective is AI should be fully embedded in our entire kind of ecosystem, alongside the right guardrails and processes and so on. But part of the way I like to think about it is there's probably three different categories that you need to think about from an AI strategy perspective and how you think about kind of rolling these things out. One is making sure that you everybody in the organization has the access to AI tools to help them to do their job better, but also the right training and the right support to kind of make mistakes and to learn from those and to get better. And one of the things that I've been really pleased to see over the last kind of 12 months at Carmoola is more and more people who work there are using, whether it's AI assistants or whether it's kind of more automation tools, just to actually kind of take away the monotonous part of their role, or to speed analytics up, or to automate reporting. And so that's a really nice kind of win, that everybody in the business starts off by thinking, how can I use AI to make this process or this piece of work easier and better? Mm-hmm. I think the second is more about the automation side. So as you'll appreciate, kind of the process of buying a car or getting a loan to buy a car can be quite complex. There's a lot of things that need to be checked. There's a lot of data that might flow into that. And there's a real risk that becomes a very manual process. And so kind of a big focus for us is, how do you automate as much of that process as possible in a way that, again, is fully focused on the customer experience, mm-hmm. whilst protecting the business. And so kind of looking for those opportunities to automate conversations with customers, or to automate some of the checking that might have to happen in the background, so that we're comfortable that the car is the car that we're financing, and it's not a fraudulent application, for example. And so there's a whole load of automation that happens. And then the third pool, I think, is where you look to maybe have some of those, a smaller number of bigger, kind of more company strategy moving opportunities. So picking a few of those areas. And as I said before, kind of aligning those with the business strategy and the customer experience is more likely to give you a better opportunity. So I think it's almost kind of thinking about that foundation layer first, with kind of giving everybody the tools, the opportunity, the experience, automating as much as possible so you're freeing up people's time, and then kind of focusing on those one or two big areas to really move the needle.
So at that very base layer, it's like moving people off of typewriters into word processors, right? It was a change that everyone had to make. There was a company member I saw recently at what happened at Apple when they finally banned typewriters. They weren't buying any more typewriters. But it's that kind of, everyone is using this in some way, shape, or form. It's part of how we do business. It's part of how we do information technology. But that top level, that very complicated, this is fundamentally changing the way our business operates. I can only imagine that, given the space that you guys operate in, that can be a rather large advantage if you get it right.
Yes, and I think it all adds up, actually, because I think if you get each of those three layers right, each of them reinforces the other two as well. So it's very hard, for example, to free up the great people that we have to focus on the big projects if they're doing lots of manual work.
They're still banging away on typewriters. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think that's been a bit of a game changer. So for example, analytics. So I lead a very small analytic team, mm-hmm. and there's a very real risk that we become the bottleneck for the business, because everybody needs some data to understand what's happening, or to understand, has this test worked in the way that we wanted it to. And by using AI to help democratize analytics, it means that my team is no longer the bottleneck. Now, we're still involved in the process, because you still want to make sure that you've got an expert level of review, or an expert providing the context to the AI. Mm-hmm. But it's had a big multiplier in terms of the amount of analysis as a business we're able to get done, but B, who is able to actually do that analysis.
That segues incredibly nicely into the bonus question that I got from Neil McIver, one of my colleagues at esynergy. What strongly held opinion have you held about data leadership that most of your peers would disagree with?
Oh, that is a great question. I think, you've got to be able to let it go. That's probably one of my key pieces of advice. I think a lot of people spend many years building a career for themselves where you get lots of experience, you kind of hopefully fight your way towards the top.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at that point, it's quite easy to get very defensive about A, where you are, and B, how you got there. And when something like AI comes along, which is quite transformational, I think it is very easy to, fold your arms and tut a bit and go, well, this is not going to work. Now, I'm not suggesting you have to kind of drink the Kool-Aid and believe everything, but I think you are doing your career and your occupation a disservice if you're just going to put your fingers in the ears and go, well, these people can't do this. And so I think being able to go, right, everything I've done, I should be comfortable walking away from it in the knowledge that I've learned the things I need to learn to do the next thing. And so I think that's probably how I would summarize it.
That's a brilliant answer to that question. It really is. Anyway, thank you so much, Dan, for sharing your story and insights with us today. It's been incredible to hear about some of the challenges, some of the things you guys are working on, and the lessons that may help some of our listeners also navigate some of this. Before we wrap up, to end each episode, we ask a simple but powerful question. In one sentence, what is the one piece of technology advice that you wish every business leader understood sooner?
You probably trust the things you've done more than you should. And you probably don't trust what's coming next enough.
That is absolutely brilliant. I think it's true. And it ties in very well with the piece of advice that you gave on Neil's question about data leadership.
I mean, as a statistician, my natural bias is to trust previous data.
Yeah.
But I think you end up down a cul-de-sac if you do.
That is incredibly insightful. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thank you.